Donald Trump shocking the world today by announcing that he is declassifying everything associated with one Crossfire Hurricane. You remember that whole thing going all the way back to 2016 when they decided they were going to wiretap the phones at Trump Tower to spy on Carter Page? Because, well, that's what they had to do because Donald Trump was a threat to democracy. They had intelligence that suggested from Russia Donald Trump would be a threat to democracy. Remember that? I remember this. Donald Trump coming out in a meeting just moments ago here announcing that all documents pertaining to Crossfire Hurricane, this is Comey's worst nightmare, you guys, this is what he feared, would be released. Let's listen in.
Lastly, sir, we have an executive order for your attention on the very important subject of election integrity. We believe that this executive order is the farthest reaching executive action taken in the history of the Republic to secure our elections. Among numerous other aspects of this executive order, this is going to cut down on illegal immigrants on the voter rolls, ensure that the Department of Homeland Security and the data that they have available is being fully weaponized to ensure that illegal immigrants aren't voting. This will include a citizenship question on the federal voting form for the first time. This executive order instructs the EAC to cut federal funding to states that don't take reasonable steps to secure their election. This calls on the Department of Justice to vigorously prosecute election crimes, particularly in states that we don't believe are in compliance with federal law around election integrity. I could go on for a while, sir, but compliance with National Election Day rules, cracking down and investigating and prosecuting foreign interference in our elections, revoking President Biden's Executive Order 14019, which essentially weaponized government to corrupt and pollute our election process. There's a lot in here, but we believe that these are very important.
Okay, so that's like part one, right? Did you catch that, guys? They're going to actually require licenses when you go and vote. Some of that being done by executive order, but the other biggie, again, the declassification of all those files.
Next, sir, we have a presidential memorandum for your attention. This memorandum requires the immediate declassification of all FBI files relating to the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. This was obviously one of the instances of the weaponization of law enforcement powers of prosecution against you and others. We believe that it's long past time for the American people to have a full and complete understanding of what exactly is in those files.
Which gives the media the right to go in and check it. You probably won't bother because you're not going to like what you see. But this was total weaponization. It's a disgrace. Should never happen in this country. But now you'll be able to see for yourselves, all declassified. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All declassified?
Yes, sir.
Everything?
The FBI file with there's a classified annex, but other than that, this we'll put everything in the public eye.
This is amazing, guys. This is a big deal.
Is anybody going to look? What about you? You going to look?
This is a huge deal, okay? So I know you feel like it's taking you back in time a little bit. I get it. But this is what they were so fearful of, right? This is what Comey feared. This is what everybody feared. Okay, he's going to come after the CIA, the FBI, every agency out there because he's on to us, effectively. And you know he is. I'll never forget how mad he was that day in 2016 when he found out that Carter Page was being wiretapped. And by the way, this is going to get us to where we're going in terms of the Signal thing and Mike Waltz and Tulsi Gabbard and just these explosive hearings on the Hill today and explosive commentary out of Mike Waltz just moments ago, which actually loops this all together because the question now is this Signal text thing that the Atlantic reporter is reporting on, is this like a new kind of Russia? Did they possibly, could they have, and this is what has to be investigated. This is why Tulsi was not speaking about anything when they asked her, even so much as, were you on this text chain? She wouldn't say anything because she said, this is going through an NSC investigation. We have to figure out just exactly how this happened. I mean, let me just tell you, it doesn't like easily randomly happen that you just add somebody into a Signal text. But I will say this, like things can get hacked. And in light of what Mike Waltz said today, and I'm going to get to that in a moment, you kind of have to raise your eyebrows a little bit. But what's important here is that it's all coming out, right? Like, it's all coming out, every single little last bit of it. Obama and his spy docs, nowhere to hide. Don't forget, this is a president who did spy. I have two friends that he spied on. You got one, Cheryl Atkinson, whom I used to work with at CBS, and then James Rosen, whom I used to work with at Fox News, both of who were victims of this spying attempt by one Barack Obama. Well, you know who else was a victim of this? Another friend of mine, one George Papanopoulos, who I got to meet because he was like, wait a second. He was the victim of not one, not two, but 3 honeypot scams. I'm like, George. Anyway, Comey had his eye on him, apparently because he had worked overseas and he had some experience in the energy sector, and maybe because they thought he was easy prey, right? Honeypot 1, 2, and 3. Anyway, he's a really good guy. He didn't deserve any of this. I mean, they tried to ruin his life. I want to go to an interview, just a short clip of George Papadopoulos explaining how Obama was trying via James Comey and the FBI back in those days to get intel, not just on the Trump campaign, but any Republican campaign. They considered the GOP effectively the opposition because they were going after George when, guess what, ladies and gentlemen, he was on Ben Carson's campaign. At one point, they thought Ben Carson might actually win, and so they were nervous. Let's listen to George himself. You were on another campaign first. Was it Ben Carson? So when this was going down, when they were first targeting you, were they targeting you on the Trump campaign or on Carson's?
Yeah, so it looks like it was Dr. Ben Carson's campaign because that's who I was working for in 2015. I wasn't working for Donald Trump's campaign until March of 2016. So there was also a different report that came out that the CIA with foreign governments was actually targeting 26 Trump associates. And Dr. Ben Carson was one of those associates. I was one of them. So what it looks like was going on here, Trish, was that there was a full on-scale targeting of rivals to Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's potential third term, which obviously would have been reflected in Hillary Clinton's potential victory.
If I'm following you correctly, they were out there trying to infiltrate other campaigns, not just the Trump campaign. They didn't know who was going to be the Republican nominee. They wanted to make sure that they had information on all the potential Republican nominees.
Yeah, so when I was on Ben Carson's campaign, he was actually the only candidate that actually led in the polls at one point during the campaign season. People thought it was candidate Trump. Actually, Ben Carson had 10 to 12% of the electorate. He was extremely popular among evangelical Christians, which was a major voting bloc, and it still is, obviously, in the United States. And I believe it was that support and that endorsement of Trump that really torpedoed Ted Cruz's campaign. So when you have people with that type of support, Ted Cruz, other people who are very popular, it's no surprise that the FBI, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, with the Obama administration, was going to spread their tentacles into various campaigns, see who some of the people were in these campaigns, target them, spy on them, get information.
I mean, they're using government assets to do it. It's wild. It's absolutely, I mean, like, this is like stuff in the movies, right? Like stuff that you don't really believe our U.S. government would do, but we've learned a lot of things, shall we say, in the last however many years. Yeah, you don't think they do that, but guess what? They're doing it. And they might have just done it to Mike Waltz and Pete Hegseth. More on that coming up, but first, let's listen to James Comey at the 92nd Street Y with an MSNBC reporter who may be on the payroll in one way, shape, or form. He's telling her how clever he was and how he was able to go after General Flynn. Because General Flynn was unassuming and, everybody just kind of believed that they were there to do the right thing, right? And he said, well, this wouldn't have happened in a more organized administration, so we took advantage of it. Think of what he's saying. George said the same thing happened to him, that they brought him in. The FBI showed up at his outside his apartment, asked him a bunch of questions, said, can we go in and take you to our headquarters? And he's like, sure, because he didn't know any better. And apparently he misspoke. I don't know about the details of General Flynn and whether he misspoke or just was nervous or however it went down. But in George Papadopoulos' case, he's like, I don't remember where I was like 2 days ago, let alone, 3 months ago, et cetera. And so then they get you. Anyway, here is Comey speaking with an MSNBC reporter at the 92nd Street Y, patting himself on the back. But you know what? It's all coming out right now. It's every single bit of it is coming out. So Comey, don't laugh too hard.
It's hard to imagine 2 FBI agents ending up in the same room. How did that happen?
I sent them. Something I probably wouldn't have done or maybe gotten away with in a more organized investigation, a more organized administration, in the George W. Bush administration, for example, or the Obama administration. The protocol, 2 men that all of us have perhaps increased appreciation for over the last 2 years. And in both of those administrations, there was process. And so if the FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official, you would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals, and who would be there. And I thought, it's early enough, let's just send a couple guys over. And so we placed a call to Flynn, said, hey, we're sending a couple guys over. Hope you'll talk to them. He said, sure. Nobody else was there. They interviewed him in a conference room at the White House Situation Room, and he lied to them. And that's what he's now pled guilty to.
What did he think they were coming over there for?
I don't think he knew. No, we didn't tell him. Just said, we got sending over a couple of agents. I want to ask you some questions. I didn't have this conversation. My deputy director did. But hope you got a few minutes you can sit down and talk to them. And he said, sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's bragging about it. He's laughing about it. This is all funny to him, just to get Trump, right? Because anything was okay so long as you were getting Trump. That was the whole idea behind everything that we saw from 2015 on. And he knows. Right now, Comey's got to know that they're coming for him. Because this is why it was so important, don't you see, that Donald Trump, one, not get a second term, and let alone not come back as he has now in 2025 for any kind of payback, shall we say. Because, now he's angry. Last time he was Mr. Nice Guy. I asked him personally, I'm like, Donald Trump, Mr. President, why didn't you go after Hillary when you had the chance? And he said, Trish, you know what? I still believe in America, and we're not a banana republic, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't want to go after her. She's the wife of a former president, and he genuinely meant it. Well, those were the old days, okay? And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, he's angry now. He's really angry. And in his view, and more will come out. I know a lot of people have a sure thought on Butler, Pennsylvania, but in his view, I would not be surprised if he thinks they literally tried to take him out. So he has every reason to take the gloves off, to declassify every single last bit of this information. You heard him in the soundbite. He was like, now, are you sure? Is this executive order? I'm declassifying everything. You better believe it. Gosh, Comey, run for the hills.
When you think about a second Trump administration, what do you think the implications would be for the FBI?
Oh, serious, for the Justice Department and the FBI, because Trump is coming for those institutions. He knows their power, and I think he has regrets that he didn't work hard enough to corrupt them last time. So he's coming for them, and that's a danger for all Americans. He's going to put people in positions in those organizations. He didn't have all-stars the last time. He'll have the bottom of the barrel this time, but people who will want to do his will, and that should worry every American. This election matters. Because of a reason like that, people have to participate. You cannot sit on the sideline. I don't care how you feel about Joe Biden, you must vote for him because the consequences on the other side are too severe.
All right. This is a big deal. I mean, they're declassifying everything. So you know what? Watch out, Hillary Clinton. She's laughing today about Mike Waltz and Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and this plan that was being discussed on Signal for the Houthi attack. She's laughing about that. But don't forget, she had an entire server. And then that's not even like, the worst of it to me is that her campaign knowingly went out and hired, vis-a-vis their law firm, Perkins Coie, Fusion GPS, don't forget Christopher Steele, who went and dug up a bunch of nonsense and then dressed it up with a big red bow, so to speak, and wrote this whole piece of garbage as though it was for the National Enquirer. This was the intelligence report. No, this was opposition research, for goodness sakes. That's all it was. And then they took the opposition research and used that. By the way, they forged some documents along the way. The small world we live in. Judge Boasbart, remember the judge who said you can't just deport those migrants that are known criminals to El Salvador. I want that plane to turn around in midair. Well, he's the guy that gave Kevin Kleinsmith, the lawyer at the FBI who was like forging documents so that he could push papers around more quickly to get the FISA warrant on Trump. He gave him a lenient sentence. He was supposed to go to prison. He didn't. Guess who went to prison? George Stephanopoulos. Yeah, maybe he should. George Papadopoulos, who you just heard from. Anyway, how could this have been possible, right? Like, how could it? It's great that it's all coming out, but you think, like, what's going on? Like, how could they do this? And by the way, could they be doing it again? Is that what's really going on with Mike Waltz's signal texts? It's worth thinking about. It's worth thinking about because I'm going back to, you know me, I get really wonky on this stuff. Smith-Mundt Modernization Act of 2012, ratified in 2013 as part of the Authorization Act from National Defense. It lifted the domestic ban that we had on propaganda. Because you see, in the old days, back when we were fighting the Cold War, we had what was known as the Smith-Mundt Act. And what that did was it authorized U.S. government to go in and use taxpayer dollars to create propaganda, which we could then spread around the world so that we could infiltrate basically all these different regimes that we wanted to have some effect on. And we could kind of brainwash the population into our way of thinking so that we could help manipulate elections, et cetera. But Obama came along and he said, well, I don't like that Chinese wall. We can only do it overseas. I mean, we've got organizations that also have news operations here in the US. Why don't we actually use this in the name of course, defending democracy, just like we do overseas, right? So basically, they're authorizing the US government to produce and distribute information, including news and media, only for foreign audiences through outlets like Voice of America or Radio Free Europe. Back in the day, in 1948, they prohibited any of that content. You couldn't turn it on Americans themselves until, of course, 2013, Obama, and all in the interest, right, of protecting democracy. What do you know? We repeal the Smith-Mundt Act. Well, we modernize it, quote unquote. We modernize it. And all of a sudden, the money spigot is open. And all that money that used to just go for overseas operations, propaganda operations, got turned back on us. Interesting timing, shall we say, guys, right? Given that then we decided that in the name of democracy, we had to make sure that we knew what was going on with Donald Trump's campaign, and we used George Papadopoulos to try and gain information, and Carter Page and more. I mean, this is scary, scary, bizarre stuff. And so when I see the news that comes out today that they've tacked on an Atlantic reporter, I don't know, there's a part of me that just doesn't buy it. I mean, there's a part of me that's like, okay, people do stupid things all the time. Maybe they added him. And then I'm like, no, you know, Mike said that he didn't even know the guy and he wasn't even in his contacts. So that has me asking more questions, but I think they're freaking out because there's declassification. They knew this was going to happen. What did Trump do the other day? He took away all the security clearances. He stripped them of all Hillary and her friends. And now he comes back with this doozy. I want to play for you. Some of you have heard me play this sound before. A little clip from Mike Pence. He was on with Joe Rogan recently. And Mike is a former State Department official, and he knows all about how the propaganda machine works and how we basically spent a lot of resources to get all this information overseas, and then how in 2013 it turned on us. What do you think USAID is? Right? What about, the New York Times getting $50 million from the US government in 2020 to deal with how we were going to interpret all this information on March 2020 and COVID, et cetera. I mean, this is a big, big thing. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to Mike Pence here. This is important, especially in light of the news about the signal stuff today, which we're getting to.
Make any media narrative go viral in any country on earth because of the suite of CIA proprietary media functions and its distribution network, especially when the U.S. had first mover advantage in radio and print. It's basically the U.S. and U.K. were the only games in town really in having robust radio, film, TV, and print media. So the Smith-Mundt said, okay, you can do that abroad. You can plant fake news stories in France. You can, have propaganda blare into Africa or Western Europe or Central Asia, but that can't come home. You can't psyop our own people with your propaganda organ abroad, because the whole point of authorizing this is that we get cheaper gas, we get import-export markets, we get a high standard of living, because if a foreign government doesn't want to give up its resources or allow a U.S. military base or allow joint partnerships or exports of goods or U.S. multinational corporations to operate there, then the American people suffer economically. So it was always designed to say, listen, you can do this dirty stuff abroad, but it can't come home.
Right? Except it did. It did. And who do we have to thank for that? None other than one Barack Obama. Thank you very much, guys. Gosh, I mean, this is most likely probably a big part of what went down. It was all done in the name of democracy, okay? So critics at the time expressed concerns that it could enable government propaganda. You could turn it on the US of A, and now they're like, no, we'll preserve democracy this way. So what do you think was going on? We were preserving democracy when you heard Whoopi Goldberg going on and on and on, or Joe Scarborough, or any of these nuts in Hollywood ranting against Donald Trump. It's because they were doing this all in the name of, quote unquote, preserving democracy. Maybe because, I don't know, maybe there was some kind of money trail that led back to them, that led back to these USAID ops and this massive infrastructure that they had created, which enabled them, by the way, to go after Donald Trump in the first place. It enabled Comey to put all of these operations into place. They weren't doing that on the Democrats. No, just on the Republicans, which leads us to, very importantly, what just went down. Mike Waltz, Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard actually speaking. Interestingly, Time, shall we say, they're having the intel hearings today, and what do you know? The reporter from Atlantic comes out with this whopper last night. Gosh, before I get to that piece of my mind, this is just for you, because I know that you were saying in the chat, hey, is Trish going to be wearing gold today? I will one day, because I get a beautiful, beautiful gold dress that I get to wear one of these days on the show, because I do love gold. TrishLovesGold.com, TrishLovesGold.com. You can sign up for more about how, more information on how to get this $15,000 in free silver. If you text Trish to 65532 today, these are our friends over at American Hartford Gold, and if you're interested in buying gold, which I do think in light of everything is kind of a good investment. I have a few ideas on investing, as you know, because that is my background as a financial news reporter, former Goldman Sachs. Oh yeah, I'm one of those. At one point I was in the CFR too. Anyway, Council on Foreign Relations. Anyway, so yeah, I know how the sausage is made, shall we say. It's one of the reasons I like gold. Check them out, 1-844-495-1115. Go to TrishLovesGold.com. Find out how you can get $15,000 in free silver. And then if you're interested in a few other things, I got some more ideas for you, okay? Go check out my portfolios. I got 3 of them here together with my colleague, my co-founder, Rob Horton. Brilliant, has worked on Wall Street for 20 some odd years, running billions of dollars. And we're so lucky to have him. This is my financial newsletter I started in conjunction with Rob. I want you guys to go check that out. 76portfolios.com. You can see all the amazing numbers on our top holdings I'm putting up right there. The other thing you can do, you know what you can do? You can go use code word dollar at 76research.com. I'll give you that in the show notes, and also maybe a little bit later in the program. And just one more commercial for you. One more, and then I promise that's it, because I want you to stay healthy. Balanceofnature.com. Go to balanceofnature.com. This is how I stay healthy. I did have a cold this year, but normally I get like 6. Thank you to Balance of Nature for keeping me healthy and the vitamin D levels higher. Go to balanceofnature.com. Use my name, code word Trish, because you're going to get 35% off. I take the fruits and gummies. They have lots of different things there, but I take fruits and gummies. I always say that. Fruits and veggies. You see, I get something against vegetables, clearly. Fruits and veggies every day. They are gummies. They're wonderful, and they will get you hopefully in good health, with getting all the mineral content and all the vitamin content that you need to be at your best. 35% off, code word Trish, free shipping, and money back guarantee.